ignore what is happening and you don't learn from the lessons of the past, you will suffer. Well, we didn't want to put any of our own, certainly in terms of the thematic material, we didn't want to put any of our own baggage. I mean, we had no interest in putting our messages into this movie, but we thought that we should honor Tolkien by putting his messages into it.
Tyrannous reformation of the Earth, our place. That is really why he hated machines. Of course, it's perfectly true. He hated the internal combustion engine for perfectly good practical reasons. I mean, noise, congestion, destruction of cities, and many people greatly agree with him now. Into a secondary world that may not be very much more pleasant, but is at any rate very different. And there are terrors as well as beauties in the secondary world. And why should what he offered, if it is escape, not be the escape of the prisoner, which in other contexts is regarded as a very noble thing to try to do, to get away?
There is no such thing as a natural death. Nothing that happens to man is ever natural, since his presence calls the whole world into question. All men must die, but for every man his death is an accident, and even if he knows it and consents to it, an unjustifiable violation.
The road goes ever on and on, down from the door where it began. Now far ahead the road has gone, and I must follow if I can, pursuing it with eager feet, until it joins some larger way, where many paths and errands meet, and whether then, I cannot say.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another Lord of the Rings book club. We got our 4 regulars, and we'll bring in our special guest for today. Big fan and supporter of the channel, and a longtime member of the Discord. So I know you guys are looking forward to hearing his thoughts on the topics that we're covering today. But we're going through Book 4, chapters 1 through 5. So the first half of the Sam and Frodo kind of plot in the Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers, right? Pretty great section of the book, right? I think a lot kind of slower than a lot of the sections that we've covered so far. Like the closest thing approaching like a big battle or something like that is I guess the Southerners, right? I guess it was Haradrim that was specifically the sort of type that got ambushed, right? So the Haradrim with at least one Oliphant, they got ambushed by the Rangers, right? So that happened, and that's kind of the closest thing to like a big sort of set piece, if you want to think of it that way. And that really happens almost like out of scene, right? Like you sort of see a little glimpse of it, you hear some of the sounds. So we'll talk about that. But what do you guys think of this section of the book, Dane? What do you got?
Sorry, that's not me throwing up. That's Fitzy.
I was going to say, man, come on, you can't have that reaction.
No.
What do you think, Dane?
The one thing that struck me, I'll get this right off the bat, is on rereading. This is Sam's section. More so than any other part like Sam is featured kind of tangentially in Fellowship. I think Merry and Pippin got their own kind of moment to shine, but this kind of right from the get-go, it's this is Sam's rise essentially to almost main characterhood. I was really enjoying it once I was like read through 3 chapters, and okay, you can kind of see that Tolkien's really want to emphasizing some distance from Frodo and the baggage that he's going through. And a lot of the rest, it's just all kind of coming through Sam's eyes. So, no, it's the fun stuff, like going through this in a book club and discussing it, and with a mind to like, all right, what am I going to chat about this time? Anyways, I really like this section, but it really struck me on this reread, essentially, that Sam's our main character now. That's how I feel about this part.
Yeah, I think it's a good call out. Almost all of the sections that like really struck me are conversations between Sam and Sméagol, or Sam and Faramir, or some of those are some of the highlights, right? So, Alex.
No, I'd echo those sentiments pretty much exactly. Big Sam chapter, and Faramir is a dog.
Gosh, he's such a boss.
Really like that guy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure. What are you smoking today, by the way, down there in the corner? Some more caps.
Is it any surprise?
Perfect. Always bringing the level of credibility of these book streams way up. I mean, like really proving that we actually honor the lore the way that it should be honored. Which I loved Faramir's conversation about the importance of honoring the lore in this chapter. I think we're gonna have some good discussions when we get to that point. Faramir, big fan of the lore. All right, are you guys ready to bring in our guest for today?
Let's do it.
Absolutely.
All right. So the one and only, he's been on a few of our streams. We're really happy to have him back. OzzyModo, coming from Arizona, you said, right?
Arizona. Greetings, programs.
So I guess we normally start out with new guests on the book stream, kind of asking them their connection with Lord of the Rings and Tolkien, and you've got a pretty long story, I think. There some good stuff to share, right? So where do you want to start on your journey with these books?
Well, I'll start early. So in 1978, that was the first time I read Lord of the Rings. Had the paperback set from that time. Unfortunately, I can't show them because they're not here. But that kind of got me into D&D, and so I learned to play D&D when I was at science camp at Northern Montana University in Havre, Montana. I learned from some guys from Washington, D.C., actually, that were at the science camp. So totally sucked me into that whole world. Young, I was in high school at the time, and just a huge fan of Tolkien, bought all the subsequent books, and as his son kept putting books out, I kept buying those, of course. And I also got involved in 99, a game called Middle-earth Play-by-Mail, where you used to do a turn every 2 weeks, and you'd send in your orders. And I played that for about 7 years, kind of burned out on that, but that was a ton of fun. And that game was fully licensed from the Tolkien estate by a guy named Bill Fields. Very well designed game, and had a lot of lore in it. One of the interesting things I found in that game is each of the 9 ringwraiths was a nation / character, and then the Dark Lieutenants, Gothmog, and was the 10th nation. Each side had 10 nations, and the interesting thing is Tolkien only ever named Mirazor, the Witch King. He never named the other 8. They never had a name in any of the lore. So Bill Fields had to make up names for the other 8 ringwraiths. So I just thought it was interesting as much detail as he put into everything in the backstory and the lore. He never really named the other ringwraiths. So anyhow, that's my Tolkien thing. Still a huge fan. I love the movies. I was very joyous to share it with sort of the normies, if you will. It was really funny being at the first time I watched the first movie. You know the whole story. That movie actually made me cry twice, which is for me was very odd, but I loved it that much. And I remember people in the crowd going, "Wait, what?" You know, when Sam and Frodo go across the river and the movie ends, they're like, "Wait a minute." So yeah, it's like, yeah, there's a lot more story to come, guys. And so it was very cool. So, I thought Jackson did it right.
Correct me if I'm wrong here. You didn't just play that that Lord of the Rings kind of game, right? I think you might have successfully played that game a little bit. Is that true?
Yeah, they had a number of world championship tournaments, and I was on the world championship team for 3 years in a row. It was actually the main team guys were based in Australia, so somehow I got myself and another couple of guys from Seattle got on with the guys from Australia, and we were on the Australian team. So we owned all the Europeans and the Americans.
Well, that's quite the lineage in kind of following along with these. I don't know, maybe one of you guys. I was not alive in 1978.
I was born in 1978.
Oh, there you go. You guys are all youngsters. So yeah, it was a really unique time. It really was. And there wasn't a lot of fantasy books at the time. There was some. Terry Brooks's Sword of Shannara came out roughly in that time zone. I don't remember the exact year, but yeah, I was down at the bookstore back when bookstores existed, and I was trying to soak up just about anything I could find. So, Michael Moorcock books were great. I have all the original paperbacks of those. Stuff like that. I just soaked that up. So yeah, Elric is an awesome tale. So.
Well, I think Alex has been advocating for us to do the Elric stories here at some point. But this seems like a decent opportunity to just thank people in the chat. We've got Gadfly Fiction, who has been a guest on with us a couple times. We have Lady Balefire, who is talking bad about Marines.
Lady B, come on.
What is she, a DA from New York?
Oh, good. That's good. But she'll hopefully be on with us again. I think in Return of the King, I think she has a section that she wants to be on with. And we got Joseph Dredd. Thanks for coming out. And hey, LPK showed up saying that young Tolkien was kind of working for him, which, I mean, hey, to each their own. And then let's see, Trip waking up early for our stream out as well. And looks like James Knight, thank you. He's also advocating, looks like, for the Elric stream. So we'll have to see how we have time. I would say right now, if season 2 of the Wheel of Prime continues to have no set date, we might have time for Elric. We might finish up the Lord of the Rings and be sitting there like, well, they still haven't announced anything, and we got sure. What's the second longest book series? Right, Elric's got a good handful of books.
It's got a lot of books, but they're all real short, so it's not too bad.
I just want to bring you guys down memory lane, but I remember kind of at the outset of us doing the rewatch, there were some concerns that if we split the episodes as much as we did, that we would not get through season 1 in time before season 2 came out. Just want to note it's been now officially a year since our very first rewatch aired. That anniversary was a couple of days ago.
Wow.
And still season 2.
Gosh, we have been doing this for over a year now, and we still haven't. I don't know. The Twitter mob hit squad hasn't showed up at our houses yet. So there you go. They might not be as powerful as they think they are, guys.
Bring it on.
Right, please.
There you go, Steve.
I know Alex will slap around that.
Steve's making a prediction here. Season 3 is going to come out before season 2. Yep.
That might be. Right. They'll do it like The Witcher. They'll play it in scrambled order, like random. And then you got to figure out what order it is. So,
and then they'll claim it was a great job of storytelling.
They'll blame it on the writer's strike.
The difference is that I think with The Witcher, you could do kind of like what you could do with Firefly, of like rearrange the episodes and like it would make sense chronologically. I think with Wheel of Prime, I'm not even sure within season 1 you could make that make sense. If you add in more seasons of Wheel of Prime, there's no chance that you can reorder them into a sensible story.
Yeah. I woke up. I don't know if you guys saw this news with the writer's strike, because the showrunners for Rings of Power are in that
they're all in the WGA.
They can't do their jobs, and they're going to continue filming the show.
Yep.
What an admission that is, where you're like, yeah, our 2 lead showrunners, producers, and writers are not allowed to be on set while we're doing the show, and like the show must go on.
Yeah.
So wait. What we're gonna get is a Rings of Power that more resembles Step Brothers than Tolkien. Because I don't know if you guys know this, but that
I was gonna say, did the first one resemble Tolkien?
I don't know. I occasionally laughed at Step Brothers. I didn't get any enjoyment out of Rings of Power.
I don't know. I think there actually is maybe a 1-to-1 comparison between Rings of Prime, if you will, and Step Brothers. You guys remember that scene where they made him eat the white dog shit? I think that might be maybe an allegory, if you will, for the fandom and Rings of Prime.
There's a boat in both of the movies.
There we go. And the boat sinks.
How can you forget the horse scene? That scene was hilarious. Actually, they didn't mean it to be.
as big a Tolkien nerd as I am, I haven't watched Rings of Power. I couldn't.
Don't.
Like,
good for you.
I didn't want that in my headcanon. It's like, it's so disappointing too. It's just swing and miss. Gosh, so disappointing.
You're not missing out. But
Nope.
no, Ozzy, I thought great to have you on this, because one thing that we kind of like to get with the guests is the different perspectives. And I think there's a whole generation of us readers really that I think Alex represents this for us, but the movies came out when he was a child, right? So there isn't really that long period of time where you can let the books create an impression on you and then the movies come after. A lot of people who read Lord of the Rings right now, sometimes the first impression they have is the movie. So there's a different way that they view the books. So it would be interesting to hear. Yeah, it would be great just to hear your takes as we go through the chapters today about the books itself, parts that you like about it, how you view it. And invariably, because I think our conversation always kind of goes back to those films, what you think they did right, what you think they might have done wrong, or what they could have done, or if the adaptation, the rules of adaptation are really, they hit it on the head. Because I think there's a lot that they changed with Faramir, especially, that we'll get to. And it's an interesting discussion to see, is this the right way to do it? Did they do it right? And is that the best way to go with a film adaptation? So,
yeah, I mean, I'll give you a preview, is that I forgave him pretty much all his license he took, because he really had it's tough to squeeze it all in there. The most obvious example is having and instead of Glorfindel, fetch Frodo the river, stuff like that. But it really did the best he could to get it done. And I like the extended versions. Of course, I bought all those, and those were great because here's some even more content. So anyways, happy to lend my opinion. No problem.
We got Steve in the chat who's just being a troll, and Nerdporeal Lifeform has showed up. So thank you for coming out as well. And Steve, keep the questions coming. Next time, if you actually learn to read and read these books, you can come onto the panel.
Troll of the Dragon.
Good God.
Let's go ahead and talk about these books. Also, for those of you who might be wondering, Nathan Amana Manethrin is borrowing my internet connection today. That's how he keeps on dropping in and out.
Yep.
I blame the North Koreans.
There you go. There's currently a balloon that's sucking up all the internet floating somewhere.
Somebody's
just
hitting him.
about to say that.
Nate, somebody's hitting you with a denial of service attack. So
Yeah.
it's the anti-tobacco lobby.
Yeah, well, they can go straight to hell.
You're smoking on live TV, so
Fucking Rob Reiner.
All right. In respect for Nathan, his poor internet connection, and the fact that he does have kind of a deadline for when he's got to get off today, let's go ahead and get into this with the Taming of Sméagol, which is basically just Sam and Frodo being lost in in just the rocky outcroppings, the maze of man, I guess one of you guys will have to tell me the actual name of this because I'm spacing on it right now.
Emmanuel.
The Emmanuel, thank you. Which I love the pronunciation. That if you guys are doing the audiobook, I've been doing kind of like back and forth between the two for these. And the audiobook, the original one, crushes all this stuff for those of you guys who are interested in it. So yeah, they are lost. They're going along. They have to climb down a big sort of cliff face and almost have some disaster there. And then they finally get down into the dead marshes. But Sméagol catches up with them, and they, I guess you could say, lay an ambush for him and sort of just barely get the better of him. But that's kind of what happens in this scene, right? They capture Sméagol. A lot of good stuff. I guess what do you guys want to cover on this? What are your kind of initial thoughts on these chapters or this chapter?
For me, this one is all the setup. It is. We get that Sméagol has a much larger role to play in this, and Frodo was given the option. Hey, do we kill him right now, or do we let him hang out? And they chose to spare him, and because they showed mercy to probably the most wretched creature in Middle Earth, it all works out in the end.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of a fulfillment of the discussion that Frodo had between him and Gandalf about Gollum, and how that mercy kind of it allows them to continue on their quest, because without this unlikely union, Frodo and Sam would never have escaped this running around in circles type of issue, and it's as much of a remiss as it is to Sam. It also creates a great transition point to what Dane and Alex were talking about earlier, is driving that focus now to Sam and how he's always, always, always geared towards protecting Frodo. And that is his sole drive. And this will continue on all the way through the next section. And it culminates in the chapter of Samwise the Brave, which is probably my favorite chapter in the whole series.
Fantastic. Samwise the Brave. I like that he goes over the side of the cliff first, or at least tries to. So we see, bravery mixed with maybe a little bit of youthful enthusiasm, right?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah. That conversation with Gandalf actually came up directly again, right? So he literally had the same dialogue come back to Frodo's mind, right?
There's a long kind of italicized section towards the end of the chapter where a lot of that gets rerun.
Which they did in the movies.
For me, I think, so when I first read this as a 10-year-old, a lot of the schizophrenia stuff with Gollum's character went completely over my head. I actually thought that wonderful scene from the film where Gollum's talking, or Gollum Sméagol is having the conversation, and the camera does the fast cuts, and it kind of looks like they're standing or talking opposite to each other.
Yeah,
I thought that was actually an invention, and really, when I reread the books after the movies, I was like, oh wait, it was here all along. But of course, that goes over the head of a 10-year-old. But there, that is one hell of a way to introduce a complex character. Like, talk about escalating Gollum in terms of complexity, because now when you read his dialogue, it's two people with one voice. Oftentimes he's speaking to himself or different aspects of himself. And it's very, very difficult to read, but man, can it make for a fantastic performance. And oh my God, I think they lucked out with Andy Serkis. That guy made a name for himself with those films.
Yeah, he did a great job as it in the movies for sure.
Yeah. And it's another point to that whole thing is Sam recognizes this every time you sit there and read. Sam catches that greenish glint in his eyes.
Yeah.
And so Sam's very aware of this whole thing going on. And so that's why he's slinker and stinker.
One of the things that I liked about that, and we'll talk about it in Window on the West, Frodo sees it also. He sees the green light in Gollum's eyes when he's about to be captured by the Rangers, right? Which really is an interesting aspect that, like, it's not just in Sam's mind. Like, Tolkien sets it up as like, no, he legitimately is manifesting physically these two different personas, which is pretty interesting. But I have to do, because I feel like this has been my job on the last few streams, to point out just Tolkien's sort of just fantastic language and things that I love, the charming aspects. Previously, I brought out the word dingle and how he just loved that word and used it repeatedly. This one, I think the word of the day I'm going to highlight is Ninnyhammer. It was fantastic. Loved it. Loved every second of it. I love that they said it several times. And like, so yeah, Sam remarking on his rope being left behind, which I love the fact that they forgot they had the rope. But yeah, so
to this point, that's the majority of Sam's character is discussions about rope.
That's
we're going to be honest, right? But I did like the way that the film actually did this, right? They got the rope. Sadly, it was his gift in the film. But that they used it. They had kind of the one chance, and then it did come loose.
Yep.
And other things too, like Frodo, you get that brief moment of tension and he thinks he's falling, and nope, he found the bottom because it was just like the mist was only obscuring like the final foot of the whole cliff. So
yeah,
the more I read this, the more it's just, they went back to the books. They tried to put in as much as they could.
I think the one thing, and Ozzy, I'll be curious your thoughts on this, right? So in the books, Sam, he wants to go first originally. He tries to go over the side. Then Frodo says, no, I'm going to climb down. But then Sam does actually go down first. He makes the argument that, if one of us is going to fall and knock the other down, like I should be the first one, so I don't take both of us with us. And then Frodo feeds the rope over the side with Sam going down first. And then Frodo sort of like self-belays to go down, right? In the movie, it inverts it where Frodo goes down first, Sam follows. I like, talking about the bravery of Sam, like, I like the setup there of Frodo being, and Alex, I think you said this, right? That Sam's impulse is always to protect Frodo. So him going first, like, I liked that.
Yeah.
But
well, the other thing about it too is my feeling is that, Sam can still think he has a clear head, right? And Frodo's getting incrementally more and more weighed down by the ring. And so Sam's the clear thinker, as I think Alex mentioned, where, Sam's like, no, this is can't trust this guy. So him going first is the clear thinking. It's like, yeah, this makes sense. I need to go first, Frodo. I don't want to knock your butt down and kill you. So, I think I agree that he's the hero, really. It's kind of like in Wheel of Time where Tam's the real hero, right? It's somebody that you don't really think of. And, Sam's definitely the anchor for Frodo. Otherwise, there's no way. So,
yep. Mm-hmm. And I think it really does go back to, Tolkien's vision of Britain. Hey, we have this kind of rural guy. He might not be the most polished, but he's brave. He thinks well. He's selfless. He's
right.
Sam's incredible. Love that guy. 10 of 10. Would recommend.
Well, also I like, again, with your idea that Sam maybe represents Tolkien's kind of view of Britain, right? So Sam also has the tendency to bring out some poetry now and then. He's not just a guy who toils with his nose in the dirt, right? Like he'll surprise you with his, he's the one who says the poem about the Oliphants. Like, you're just like, wait a second, aren't you supposed to be like the bagman? Like, why are you over here reciting poetry and talking about, lore and talking about, it's he's got layers, right?
But I think it's very interesting that, and I think it's more clear sort of in the audiobook when you read it. Sam's poetry is not like everybody else's poetry. Sam's poetry is kind of goofy, childlike. It sounds like Dr. Seuss shit. And
hey, not that there's anything wrong with that.
No, not at all. But
No.
it isn't the soaring epic that you get when Aragorn or Frodo is talking about poetry. Which good. I think it's very
what
much
else?
the character, like.
You've got Aragorn. He needs to send Boromir on his way in a funeral, and comes up with this massive oration, handles 2 stanzas. And then you've got Sam, who basically is saying, I remember this from ages and ages ago. Like he memorized it, and then it's not very good, but Aragorn's able to kind of come up with something grand on the fly.
And as I recall, in the beginning of the book, Sam learned a lot by sitting down in front of Bilbo and listening to stories and trying to absorb all that he could for his, the meager mind, lack of a better phrase. And this kind of stuff, this comes through this typically unlearned mind that it's just a youthful exuberance that tends to be unhindered by the passage of events. That he's always looking towards the positive. There is a perspective where Frodo mentions later that through the course of trying to figure out how much food they have left, and that there's really not much use for trying to plan for after the mission's done. And Sam kind of keeps quiet, but then later on says, "No, he says we're coming back."
Which is a great lead into kind of the next thing I wanted to say, which is so much of these lines and scenes are like directly, like sometimes verbatim, sometimes just the essence of the scene is brought into the movie. So, Ozzy, again, you were talking about seeing the movie as somebody who had really known and loved the books and the series for a long time beforehand. Lines like when they actually capture Gollum, Frodo gets behind him, puts his sword against his throat, and has that line, this is Sting. You've seen it before, right? And it's like that is those types of things where I feel like Peter Jackson was saying, hey, this is a scene we're trying to accomplish. And it was always, it seems like he always had the first thought of, is there a line from the books that we can insert, into this? Can we preserve as much as possible? Is that kind of your feeling of this chapter or kind of the adaptation in general as well?
Yeah, I think that he definitely had reverence for the story and tried to throw, Easter eggs, if you want to call them that, in as much as he could, paying reverence. I think the one thing he did improve, this might be blasphemy, but and of course he had to do it in the movie, was interleaving the chapters. One of the things I didn't like about the Two Towers, again with the blasphemy, is the Helm's Deep scene was so good and so well written and so fun to read, and then you get into we're lost in the rocks and we're wandering around and then we're in a swamp and it's super boring relative to the stuff that just happened. So someone like Robert Jordan or even George R.R. Martin probably would have interleaved the chapters so that, you're jumping back and forth between perspectives. And I'd love to hear your guys' take on whether or not they should have done that, because I'm not sure. I haven't given it a deep thought about would it have ruined anything, but on rereads, I'm always like, the second half of the Two Towers. But that's one of my take, and I think Peter Jackson made that work with the movie, right? By skipping between the two groups of main characters.
And maybe we get more into that in the next section. But no, I hear exactly what you're saying, Ozzy, in that so the Sam and Frodo travel into Mordor is the stealth mission, right?
Yeah.
They have to keep quiet. It's a lot more psychological too.
Look over here while over here we're,
Yeah. But no, you're 100% right. When reading it, it's like the action is with Aragorn and Legolas and Gimli, and it's the fighting and it's Rohan. And then you get to Return of the King and you're like, sweet, I'm with Aragorn again.
Yeah.
I'm big battles and the Rohirrim and everything. And the Sam and Frodo story is, I think it's a good counterweight, but yeah, if you, what the movie does really good is you're able to hop back and forth a lot more quickly. But obviously, if they wanted to stay true to the books, you would have had a cut of the Two Towers that was all these, Legolas, Gimli, and Aragorn story all the way through, and then midway through the movie, you would switch to solely Sam. That would probably not have worked. So I get what you're saying.
Mm-hmm. So I want to pitch an idea to you guys. I didn't do it this time, but as I read this, I think that I decided that I might do this the next time I read the series. I think that book 3 and book 4 are perfectly well divided, but in exactly the wrong order. And the reason I say that is book 4 follows Sam and Frodo, and you reach Faramir and you learn of Boromir's death, and you have Frodo talking about, we're the last of our fellowship. Like, they're all dead, right? And if you had not read book 3 just before this, you as the reader would also be left in that lurch because of the way that the Fellowship of the Ring ends, right?
We're jumping a bit ahead there, but if you really wanted to do that, so they do establish in here that someone must have survived in order to put Boromir.
But that's just a theory. That's just, and we'll talk about that later. I'm just kind of pitching an idea that if you're going to split it, I think it works well in the book like this. I agree that it wouldn't have worked very well in the movie, but I think that if you are going to split them, I think they should be read in the reverse order.
Oh, it's an interesting thought experiment, Pips, because for all we know, Tolkien might have wanted to do that, and the editor said, no, you really need to swap it here because this first half is really good. But
nobody.
You think Dane he would have been able to do whatever he wanted?
Yeah, real thanks. I appreciate your support.
One quick thing that I think I should mention, it's completely unrelated to Tolkien, but it was mentioned tangentially. George R. R. Martin, books 4 and 5 of the Song of Ice and Fire.
Sucks. Oh, sorry.
He split his story there by character and location as well. One thing that I've done and I know works chronologically perfectly is if you read a chapter from Crows and then you read a chapter from Dance and switch back and forth, the chronology lines up perfectly. It's absolutely perfect. The problem is it's one really, really long book where not a whole lot happens, but it does work perfectly. But I know a lot of people started balking at that series when I told them, yeah, Tyrion's not in the 4th book. And then they're just like, psh. Anyways, side note.
Yeah. All right, we're just a fantasy stream.
Yep.
Anyone else have some thoughts on the Taming of Sméagol? I'll read kind of where it ends so we know.
It burns.
The burning of the rope. They talk about Lembas and what he's going to eat, but I think what's really interesting here, we were talking about poetry earlier. We also get poetry from Sméagol.
Yep.
Like right at the start of chapter 2.
Yep. Which I think we need to talk first about the actual binding of Sméagol before we go on to that, right? The the swearing, by the precious instead of on the precious, right? Which they did port a line there with a slight change, right? About the ring is treacherous; it'll hold you to your word, I think is what the movie says, which is pretty similar.
Mhm.
I think that I'm not sure that the movie made as much of a point of the like specific words that Gollum swears, which is a huge part of Gollum and Sméagol's like back and forth of Gollum trying to like, well, what I would call, he's trying to sea lawyer his way out of of sort of his requirement. He's like, well, we swore to serve the master, but if we become the master. So
You're
there's
sure he's the first lawyer in Middle Earth? That works since he's evil mostly.
There you go.
Apologies to all you lawyers out there. Sorry.
Do we think this is Tolkien's sort of commentary on lawyers?
That's your take.
Yeah. It's like, what do you call a lawyer at the bottom of a lava pit?
Gollum?
A good start.
Okay, so I wanted to bring that up. I think that there's some good stuff there. So for you guys reading at home, like, pay attention to the words there. I think it's good. And I like going into the next passage, like Dane said, Sméagol's poetry. So Dane, do you want to give us the Sméagol poetry?
No, man.
No, you don't want to?
I don't want to do my Andy Serkis or Gollum voice, but I just really like that it also brings back the riddles in the dark, because it is a poem about fish, and there are lines. Alex, correct me if I'm wrong. This is one of Gollum's riddles to Bilbo, right?
I believe it's a callback to it. I'm not sure if it's exactly.
Well, there are lines in like alive without breath, as cold as death, never thirsting, ever drinking, clad in mail, never clinking.
Yes, I believe that is one of the ones that he hits Bilbo with.
Okay.
I think that the knowledge that it's a throwback to that makes sense with the way that he does it in the book here, where he says, is cold and wet so nice for feet, and now we wish. And then he says, what does we wish? We'll tell you. He guessed it long ago. Baggins guessed it, right? So he looks at Frodo like, you're supposed to know the answer to this, right? So it is a good callback to his own stuff. And I like that we got this in the movie as well, right? Like they cut out, I think, so much of the poetry of the story. So it's maybe strange that we saw Gollum's kind of poem when we missed so much of the rest. What do you guys think about that being? Why was this more important, for example, than Gimli in Khazad-dûm or Aragorn at Rauras, or any of the other really truly fantastic or Bilbo in Rivendell, right?
In this part specifically, Pips, which I think in the movie is moved to the Forbidden Pool, right? It's when Gollum was kind of on his own and separated, and then he caught a fish, and all the rangers are pulling the bows out. It's supposed to, again, paint Gollum, Sméagol in a more sympathetic, pitying light.
Yeah.
Right? He's there, he's caught a fish, and he's eating it and whatnot, but he's singing a bit of nonsense verse. And he comes across a heck of a lot more childlike than what he ultimately is. And I think that's the reason why they picked it. So
I think that I agree with what you're saying, that it probably serves too critical of a purpose in humanizing Gollum. Because they cut so much of the rest of Gollum's conversations with Sam and with Frodo. Like we see the potatoes, kind of the brassiconies scene, right? We see, what is that chapter called? Like herbs and water, or herbs and stewed rabbit.
Herbs and stewed rabbit.
So we see that, but we don't see a lot of their other stuff, especially in the Dead Marshes, right? Where you kind of learn a lot about Gollum's travels since Bilbo.
But bearing in mind too that the film obviously compressed the timeline a hell of a lot, right?
Yes.
So And that also comes up with Faramir later on when he talks about seeing Gandalf in Minas Tirith. Obviously, that needed to get cut because in the movies, it's basically like, Bilbo, here's the ring, Frodo, I'm off. And then weeks later, the adventure begins, as opposed to start of this book and 17 years go by and then the adventure starts. And in those 17 years, obviously, Gollum was captured, was up in the Mirkwood. And I think in the film, he was similarly captured by Mordor and then set free or escaped. We don't know. So
yeah, in the film, they cut out him being captured by the elves and Aragorn.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. All right. So in the Passage of the Marshes, what do you guys have for this chapter? I mean, the Passage of the Marshes is basically just what the name is. Like the entire plot is the title, the chapter title, right? A couple run-ins with the Nazgul, right?
Gollum really doesn't like the sun or the moon.
Yes. Yeah. We see them passing the marshes daytime in the movies, right?
Mm-hmm. And Misty, yeah, there's a lot of that section that is done in daytime, and I don't think they established that in the film at all, that Gollum didn't like the sunlight or even the moonlight for that matter. But
which is probably for the good. I mean, look at every Hollywood production that's supposed to be done at night for the last 10 years. Hollywood apparently can't do scenes with darkness without you like, is my screen off? Like, what happened?
Yeah, it's crazy.
Which I think is maybe one of the best things about this movie is that, you know, when they did Helm's Deep, they were just like, yeah, everything is normal. It's just blue now. Like, where here, it's just much better done 20 years ago, because apparently that's where we are as a society.
Yeah, that's true, Alex. I think I think the marshes are pretty awesome piece of Tolkien depth. You know, one of the things that grabs you about Tolkien, obviously, is just the complete intellectual depth of the world. You know, the world building, the story, and you know, at this time, unless you've done all the back research, you're not really privy to the whole battle that happened there, and thousands and thousands and thousands of deaths, and it's just deep. It's deep stuff. The marshes.
Mm-hmm. Yep, it's a brilliant piece of world building.
But again, like in this section, we are back to kind of the travelogue. Obviously, Tolkien had the world already built and knew what Sam and Frodo would encounter along the way. But the highlight for me in this chapter isn't really the location; it's the final couple pages with the Gollum conversing with himself.
Yeah.
Again, like 10-year-old, you're not, because there's no dialogue attribution. You're not really knowing who's talking, and since it's only a page and a half, you kind of skip over it.
Do you want to try and reenact it here? Do you think we can shoot from the hip and have a 2-person?
That Andy Serkis, that one scene should have honestly got him an Oscar nomination, but I don't know if you could actually. He was a CGI character, so. But holy crap!
It was all physically acted out, right? That was one of the kind of things that they did, was the body mapping and stuff like that. And the thing that I really liked about this scene was it wasn't just the quick cuts between them, because it started out that way, but there's at least 1 or 2 scenes as it progresses that shows that he's actually physically moving between the 2 positions, right? Which actually really even elevates it further, where like, you know, Gollum is like jumping back and forth between these 2 positions and literally talking to himself and then running to the other side of the table. It's
no, he's not. He's leaning one way, leaning the other, and it exaggerates the cuts. But he's sitting in the same spot. At least how they filmed it.
I thought there was at least one where he hopped between the 2. But okay,
he hopped after the conversation was done, and he expunged Gollum from his mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, leave now and never come back. But which I don't know if that much is actually in this.
No.
Nope. No. Yeah. So in the book, he is essentially Well, Sam sees it for one, and it keeps Sam
Yeah.
suspicious. But also Sam now knows he's actually dealing with two minds in one body. In the movie, I think it does actually a pretty decent job of creating an arc. It increases the stakes for later on in the pool, where the betrayal does come, and then when Sméagol is being beaten by the Rangers, you have that wonderful creepy scene where he's huddled and Gollum comes back.
Yeah.
Right. He was banished in the earlier scene, but now, due to circumstance, he needs to come back. It's an addition from the story, but I think it really, really worked well. So
in the movie, they wanted to highlight the tension and the separation between the two, whereas Tolkien doesn't really have a lot of separation between the two in there. They're just, you get a lot of Sméagol's side, and then there's conversation that he puts in the middle of it where it's between him and Sméagol and Gollum again, and then it's a break from that, and then it goes back to that. So he still peppers it in.
Yeah.
The movie wanted to completely make a separation so that there was more of that dramatic return, as you were saying, Dane, with the beating that he was taking from the Faramir's men.
And it's also worth noting, at least in the passage of the marshes in the book here, this is where Gollum thinks about enlisting Shelob.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So the movie did the whole separate scene after they get released from Faramir and the Rangers, right? And so I think you're making a good point, Dane, where it's not just that they established an arc. They intentionally split what happens here into 2 points to make room for an arc, which Ozzy, I think in your kind of start when we were talking with you, you were talking about how some of the changes might actually have been improvements. What do you think about giving Gollum kind of a story?
Yeah, I thought it was good because the story was really there in the books, but it wasn't. I think in the movies it helped with the payoff when Gollum's really the one that destroys the ring. We're allowed to say spoilers, right? So you didn't warn me about that, but I thought it worked very well in the movie. Things that you get across in when you're reading a book, very hard to do sometimes in the movie. So, I was fine with them moving the Shelob thing. I think Peter Jackson talked about it in an interview where he really tried to cram it in to the second movie, but he just couldn't make it work. So I thought what he did worked well. I thought it was an okay change. One of those things that I forgave him for. So.
Lady Balefire, I think, brings up actually a good conversation, and I think there's a few times in this the ambush of the Haradrim was the part that I kind of wanted to talk about it, but I think the Dead Marshes are a good point to bring it up as well, along with what happens in Return of the King with the sort of I don't know, the whole thing with Aragorn's story in the movies where he goes through the dead passes and all that stuff, right? So we'll get to another spot, I think, but this is a good one.
Paths of the Dead, Bibbs. Yeah.
Paths of the Dead. Thank you.
Well, and with what Lady Balefire is talking about, I wanted to bring up this little scene because this is a little bit of a difference that they have. Frodo falls into the water in the movie,
right?
Good grief.
You're back.
Okay. So here, as I was saying, here he just kind of gets lost in thought. And there's an element of this because there's all this description about all these dead faces all over the place. And so you can see the results of the trench warfare. And Sam goes back to him and says, "Come, Mr. Frodo, don't look at them." Gollum says, "We mustn't. Let's keep up with him and get out of this cursed place as quickly as we can, if we can." I can totally see this conversation happening in the trenches between two people that are still alive and the other person who's just kind of standing there in shell shock. And Frodo just says, "All right." as Frodo says, as if returning out of a dream. I'm coming. Go on. It is. Lady Balefire's comment really kind of made this even stand out even more to me. But it's just kind of like, oh, okay, yeah. I've just seen my friend's face blown off, but okay, yeah, let's go.
Yeah.
What he went through, and you don't realize that, like when you first read the book. When I read the book in the 70s, it's like no idea he was a World War I vet,
right?
And at that time, you were allowed to be proud of America still back then. And I read a lot of World War II stuff, but I didn't read a lot of World War I stuff because World War II was still, my dad was born in 38, right? So he was a kid during World War II. And so World War I had no context at all for me until much later in life, where you get into how horrific it was. And that's just a deep piece. I agree. It's what he went through and what anybody in war, I would imagine, goes through. But
you can kind of see how scenes like this in the book and how it's presented kind of inspired Jackson to go and do that documentary of that he did on World War I, where he restored all that footage. I'm blanking on the name of that documentary, but it was.
Lady B just put it in the chat. They will not be forgotten.
Yes, thank you. It is a phenomenal documentary. If you haven't seen it, I would highly recommend just buying it. It's great.
I cannot echo that sentiments enough. Having seen this, there is in my mind, a very well-founded argument that Peter Jackson has not just made the best action movie of all time, but also the best documentary of all time. That is freaking unreal how good that is. And it's interesting because World War I, Ozzy, as you talked about, is such an underreported thing in history. Mm-hmm. And that everybody hears
in the U.S. In the U.S., I think that's the case. I think if you talk to people, especially in the UK, right? I mean, in the UK, I think that for a lot of reasons, World War I is still the much more traumatic national experience. Obviously, there are still World War II veterans, and there are no World War I veterans really around still. So it's different from that perspective. But
World War I had really minimal impact on the United States, but it killed off an entire generation of young men for the UK, and they ended their empire and did all kinds of things. In the rearview mirror, it was a hugely traumatic experience for that empire. And, from Australia to New Zealand to, everybody fought. That's why it was the First World War. It is totally underappreciated. It's probably not the right word. It's kind of not the wrong word to use, but should be taught more. And that's why they thought there would never be another war, because of how horrific that was.
I mean, to put it to scale, I think the global military and civilian dead for World War I was, I don't know, 17 to 20 million or so, and then about 60-ish for World War II. But the population of the world grew so much, even though it's such a small time period, it grew so much between that time. Massive percentage of especially Northern Europe.
Yeah, you can almost forgive the French for surrendering so quickly in World War II. I was joking about it last night at a Cinco de Mayo party. Cinco de Mayo is based on when the Mexicans defeated the French. And, we'll joke at the party was, well, like it was hard, but, which is why the Mexicans don't really celebrate Cinco de Mayo. They're like, that was easy. But U.S. will take any excuse to drink something. So
super easy. Totally an inconvenience.
In all honesty, Ozzy, the French haven't been the same since they defeated themselves at the turn of the 19th century.
Yeah, true. Yeah. So, anyways, it was a funny discussion last night. So,
fantastic.
But that's kind of off a tangent, off of Tolkien.
A little bit off on a tangent. Anybody
you guys
else have?
I don't know. I
just
feel
wanna-
like Tolkien would be pretty proud of us as a strong British patriot. Ripping on the French would be very, very much aligned with his worldview.
Were you guys ripping on the French the whole time I had to pop out just now?
Most of it.
Well, I mean, we could have done it
We
longer. I mean, we held ourselves back.
You guys hear about the French gun on eBay? Never fired, dropped once.
Okay. So this was something that I learned relatively recently about the French in World War II. You know, everybody makes fun of the French for the Maginot Line and how the Germans just drove around it.
Yep.
What I learned relatively recently was the reason they didn't extend it any further is that there's a fucking forest there.
Yeah.
So they just didn't think, no, there's no way that the Germans are going to be able to get a bunch of tanks through a giant ass wooded forest, nor are they going to be able to march, 400,000 men through these woods. What they didn't appreciate is that all the Germans were on crystal meth. And so they just literally blitzkrieged through the forest. And they're like, wow, you guys covered that distance really fast.
So there's actually
Pervitin and Heinz Guderian. And,
yeah. There's actually there's kind of some other interesting stuff there. People are curious. There is at least 2 or 3, but one fairly famous one where the French actually were like, all right, super dense forests, like you can't move armor at any speed, right? Like, it's not a big deal. But they actually had identified a few critical crossings in those areas. And it was just the speed and integration of the German advance through the sort of the novel, tactic of this blitzkrieg, right? Really overwhelmed the French defenders. And there's one battle, and I'm forgetting this from my military history classes, the name of the battle specifically, but essentially, like there were French armored divisions and artillery and everything that was defending a strategic bridge that they considered like, yeah, as long as we stop them here in this sort of canyon, everything's fine. And if the French had not been so rapidly overwhelmed at that point that they didn't even have time to like destroy the bridge, had they destroyed that bridge, France likely would have been able to survive. And so there's a few really interesting points where we make fun of the French, but I don't think we give enough credit to the British or to the German.
The blitzkrieg.
Let's be careful here.
The actual development of a truly effective military tactic, right? Like, I mean, say what you will about the causes that it was used for, obviously accomplished a lot of really evil things, right? But the innovation in military tactic was pretty astounding, right? They really did revolutionize the way that armor and other sort of forces are integrated together in a way that changed warfare to the modern day, right?
part of that assault was also attacking the Low Countries, which I
going through Belgium. Okay, you got this big Maginot Line. We'll just go through Belgium and capture.
But defeating the Netherlands, because they didn't want to give the British an eventual beachhead or the airfields, but they made the decision to take out Fortress Holland, which in and of itself is terrain that's completely unsuited to tanks because you've got polders everywhere. Dikes and bridges become very, very key. It was actually the first instance of an airborne assault. They launched airborne troops, and they basically landed in The Hague with paratroopers. First instance in history. So,
yep. And it's
you talk about innovation, but this is a Lord of the Rings stream. Come on, are we going to
do? Well, we got on it because of the World War I allegory, and it's there. So
we're on the wrong war now. But all right, okay.
Nah.
Bloody French.
Back to your regularly scheduled program.
The Black Gate is closed. Segue, transition, segue.
Oh, damn it. We're back to that again. We can't get into France. There's another way.
I was going to say, here we are on Gondor's Maginot Line. And they also neglected it and allowed it to fall to the enemy. I don't have a whole lot to say here outside of I liked the way that it was adapted. this kind of stuff. They made the gap way smaller in the movie, right? It's basically just the massive gate instead of like a huge wall with towers and all that kind of stuff, and an iron gate that passes through it. It's just this like ridiculously massive gate with trolls and
instead of a fortress.
The trolls that didn't get petrified in the sun for some reason.
Well,
Different kind of trolls.
It's actually brought up, but there's what do they call it? It's basically the permanent shadow cover over Mordor.
Yep.
Right, when they're able to kind of walk down and so they said the sun should be rising, but it was still blocked. It has a name later on. It just escapes me for a second here, but no, give Tolkien some credit. He thought about that stuff, Pips.
Hey, fair. But Tolkien didn't have trolls on the walls of the Black Gate, so he didn't really think of that. And I would say Peter Jackson, we know in the Mordor or in the Moria scene, didn't remember the whole sunlight and trolls thing either. But
that's a good point.
I want to say it was a different kind of trolls.
Sure.
But
yeah.
That was my read on it. But
these are frost trolls.
Meat's back on the menu, boys. We found another one.
All right. So the Black Gate is closed. What do you guys have for this scene? Anything that you liked about this chapter that you think is necessary to kind of bring up? I mean, there's a lot of good history, I think, specifically with the Haradrim and the Easterlings and Frodo, Sam, and Gollum having conversations about that. I mean, this is the chapter where we get the Oliphant poem, right? So this is Sam and them talking about the Easterlings and the Haradrim, and Sam bringing up his childhood poem about the, gray as a mouse, big as a house, nose like a snake.
Well, the revelation of Frodo to Sam, that Frodo still has a very real perception of who Gollum is, and then how he just strikes absolute dread and fear into Gollum in reasserting what his promise was. Was awesome.
If you'll notice, though, he basically, I don't know if he used the power of the ring, but for once his presence was magnified. Yeah. And then basically immediately after, he starts struggling. Everything gets heavier for him. He struggles to move. So it's always sort of been my headcanon that, he used sort of the power of the ring there, even if he didn't put it on. I will also say that everybody owes Boromir an apology because, Boromir was like, why the hell are we going to the Black Gate? This is the dumbest plan I've ever heard. And then they get to the Black Gate and they were like, yeah, we're not getting through that.
I've kind of had the same reaction, but both in the film and in the story here. But it definitely feels like, all right, why was this your plan at the outset? Like, maybe they just needed to get there and see it before they would believe it. But it does seem to me more like the travelogue. And then maybe that's a bit of a pitfall that there were locations that he wanted to get along the way. But much more of this chapter is talking about the alternative to the Black Gate than the Black Gate itself.
Yeah. So I took this as one of the things, because it's been said specifically several times. Feel like, maybe Gandalf never even meant us to pass this way, right? So we never really had the specifics of the route that they were going to enter Mordor by. And we know that Gandalf hasn't been to Mordor in a long time. Like he doesn't go to the east. But I think we actually lost Nate a little bit more here. Here we go. He's back. So maybe it's one of those things where it's showing kind of the loss of Gandalf's leadership in the Fellowship, that without him they had to do the best they could, right? They came up with the plan that they thought maybe Gandalf intended, and then they realized the folly of that plan and how man, Gandalf probably had a better idea of how to do this,
the fact he fell in Mordor, right, was not an unplanned event. So
Yeah.
You know, the Black Gate might not have been his plan, but keeping the plans close to his chest, he didn't impart that wisdom.
That being said, the movie does amplify this slight bit of nonsense a little bit more, right? Because here they see the Black Gate, and very quickly Gollum tells them that there's another way, and tension falls down. They decide not to approach any further. Whereas in the movie, there's a bit of a rock slide, a great opportunity to use the camouflage of the elven cloak, which is the one positive. But they really do kind of amp up the tension. But it's just like, yeah, you're going to see those fortifications. You're just going to be like, how are you going to get in? And even if Frodo's plan was like, I'll just put on the ring and go invisible, yeah, that's not going to work anymore. But we've already established that that's just going to draw the eye right at you.
So I have one more point to make here, and this is going to cause some anger, but I want you to know that this is a satirical comment, right? This is a trigger warning. I'm trigger warning. Okay, you're all about to be triggered.
Get your blue hair on, Dane.
It is on.
Mine's pretty blue.
You know, right after the tale of the Oliphant, you know, so that said Sam when he finished reciting, that's a rhyme we have in the Shire. Nonsense, maybe, and maybe not. But we have our tales too, and news of the South, you know. In the old days, hobbits used to go on their travels now and again.
I'm going to kill you.
So I think that right there is the foundation for the worst subplot of the Rings of Power.
You better hope I never make it to Virginia, Pips.
It's not
I don't
though.
live in Virginia. I'm safe.
It's not though, because he's talking about travels from the Shire to elsewhere.
I didn't say it was a good justification.
Okay.
I admitted it was a shitty justification.
Okay.
I'm saying if I put on my show shill hat, I can say, see,
Right.
Hobbit went on travels, you bigot.
Yeah, stick to the books. Stick to the books. Back to the books.
Ozzy, if you're feeling a little bit lost here.
Yep, I'm good. I'm fine being lost.
You're just like,
yep.
Yeah, Ozzy, the
This
Hobbits.
never happened. Yeah.
The Hobbits were apparently nomads that left all of their sick and poor to die on the trail behind them.
it was like the Oregon Trail, but worse. You have died of dysentery.
Yeah, and the response is, yeah, so what? We'll remember them because
less cannibalism on the Oregon Trail.
It didn't even have the hunting minigame.
Their names in a book, and Dane Ironfoot dies of dysentery. Oh, wasn't that funny?
Except they didn't even wait for him to die. Homeboy sprained his ankle, and they were like, well, unfortunately, we got to leave you, buddy.
Right. The Harfoots and their proverbial middle finger.
No one gets left behind except for you and you and you and maybe you. Oh man. Okay. Sorry. I had.
You're a good lore expert, Pips. I'm sure that you were working for the lads at Amazon to help them with their.
No, I would have a much nicer house if I shilled like that.
Fair enough.
Okay, that's all. That was the only joke that I had for this.
All right, we gotta stew some rabbit pips.
Okay. Yep. Herbs and stewed rabbit.
Mash them up. Put them in a stew.
Yeah. Potatoes. Although I think in the books they just call them taters, right? There's a lot. There is a lot
potatoes.
He says potatoes.
No, that's true. Actually, I guess now that I'm re-looking at it, and that is true. Big fan of the description of Ithilien.
Oh yeah.
Right. Like, do you guys think that this is how do you think Ithilien fits in with Tolkien's kind of view of Britain, the British Isles, because it's weird that Ithilien is the space between Gondor and Mordor, right? But then also Ithilien is described as the land that men once called Ithilien, a fair country of climbing woods and swift falling streams, right? It calls it a fair country. And the descriptions of it sounds like a fair country, right? But it's right next to Mordor. And in my mind, and this is in our intro video, right? The conflict between men and machines and industry and nature. Ithilien is the thin margin of nature that still exists in the British countryside that is kind of cheek by jowl up against the industry of man. And the industry of man is clearly what Mordor and sort of Sauron represent, right? The barren kind of wastes of the land of fire, covered with smoke, which especially in the early industrial age is the UK, right? I mean, so what do you guys think? Do you agree with my view that Ithilien specifically is that British countryside, or do you think I'm being too kind of narrow focused on it?
Well, I think it is, but it's because there's the line where it says, yes, this land has been taken by Mordor, but it hasn't entirely rotted, I think is the terminology that he uses, where it's, it's in the process of being taken over. It's, it's to use the Wheel of Time reference, the blight is advancing, but there are still places where it, hasn't quite taken over yet. And that's what this is.
But that's I think what his view of the UK was, right? Certainly, yes. Unfortunately, it's more and more true of the UK each year,
Yeah,
like the Shire would be the sort of like the idyllic sort of the British Isles of the past, right? Like the what it should have been, right? And then you have
the Midlands of his youth.
I was gonna say that, and it's also like Wales, which is sort of the far off, away from the cities kind of thing.
the place where no one goes because you can't understand anyone, and it's just not worth it.
I don't like to read too much into because again, Tolkien's saying at the outset he doesn't like allegory, and therefore I don't know like if we should be attributing places directly to other places in history. I think this is a realistic set of geography, right? What would this land be? And to me, this sounds like it's really gone back to the wild. Like it might have been part of Gondor. It might have been a settlement of men beforehand. I know in the film that they have ruins, kind of ivy-covered marble ruins strewn about. Maybe there's some allusions in this in one of the later chapters. But it makes sense to me like this. All right, so this is the eastern slope of the mountains going to Mordor. It's in the south relative to the Shire, so it's got a nice climate. And he's going on about the different trees and the wild that goes on there, and the military units that they do come across in Faramir are irregulars, right? They're rangers. This is a wild country, and you really only get into the settled habitation once you're by the river. So that would be kind of the actual frontier. And this is, I hate to call it a no man's land, because that in and of itself would evoke a World War II or World War I context. But this is kind of like a hinterland. It's a buffer zone between the two. And I think it's logical to put it in there, and I think he described it in kind of an accurate enough way.
Yeah, and it is hard by the river, so it's I think its existence makes sense because the men stayed on the other side of the river, and it's too close to the stinky Mordor on the other side. But also, Pips, you can have it be an allegory. That's the beauty of literature and art. You can interpret it any way you would like.
Here on the White Cloaks, we endorse only one interpretation of all book events, and it's our interpretation.
more accurately, mine.
Yeah, we disallow any Raffenstein interpretation.
We are an echo chamber, and everyone has to say the same thing.
That's communism, where you're not allowed to move in any direction. Everything has to be equal, and there's no creativity.
Give the governor a harumph.
I didn't get a harumph out of that guy.
Watch your ass.
Okay. Other than the boil and mash them, stick them in a stew, I liked that Sam almost, he's like, I'm not going to let this fire make any smoke. And then like the next thing, damn it, Sam.
Right.
But this has got good setup, right? So even going back to the Taming of Sméagol, they're talking about, well, what are our provisions? It's like, well, we've got lembas bread and more lembas bread. They've been subsisting on lembas bread this whole time. Gollum can't eat the stuff, so he's going off and finding other things. And now, you're kind of back into the whole travelogue, right? Every chapter, you're kind of going to a different place that was already established and thought out, and now you're in a hinterland. And lo and behold, you get a wonderful little chapter about, let's find some rabbits and let's stew them. And everything here is found in the land, right? The rabbits are found, and then they're trying to find the seasoning, and it's a little bit watered. They don't have broth with them and whatnot. This is a perfect little chapter about, let's make a meal from what's around us.
Also, this is probably Galad from the Discord's favorite chapter because it's all about stew. Anyone who has been reading in the appropriate channel in our Discord, a little bit of an inside joke for those over there. We obviously the fire brings the Rangers, right? And then we start getting into the real kind of uptick on this section of the reading, right? Like if we've talked a lot about the switch back and forth between the kind of charming sort of idyllic sort of parts of the book and Sam and Frodo and Gollum getting rabbits and making stew is definitely a switch in that direction. And then, the smoke from the fire, and then all of a sudden they're hiding in the ferns with some unknown, kind of people, right? And then, here we are. We're talking about the mission, and it's focused right back to the fellowship, the mission, the threat, right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, good, perfect summary. Yeah, good job.
No. All right, well, fine.
Lots of salt pips. That was deep, too deep. Come back to the shallow end.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay. All right. So Faramir shows up. He's Boromir's brother. We learn a little bit later, right? But he shows up and he's like, "Yo, hobbits, who are you?" Is that shallow enough? Am I going in the right direction?
Yeah.
What are you?
Yeah. I also like how they show up and they're just like, Sam and Frodo go, fuck it. If we're gonna go out swinging. So they pop out with their swords, and like, there's like one throwaway line where it was like, and then the men put away their swords. It was like, they're making fun of you hobbits because of how small you are.
Yeah, that is.
They doubted the reach of his arm.
Yep.
I think in the movie they got like hauled up out of the bush or something like that, right? Like they were like laying down watching the Oliphant, and then they got like grabbed up. Am I remembering that correctly?
They got up, and then they were on their way back to leave, and they ran right into the soldiers.
Okay, so not quite as brave and good of a moment as them sort of popping up with swords drawn, surprising the Rangers.
Yeah, it was really a combination of the two events of watching the battle going on and then meeting them.
Yep. And this is maybe one of my favorite Sam moments where Faramir is questioning Frodo rather intensely, and Sam's like, "You know what, buddy? I have had it with your shit."
You're jumping ahead a little bit.
Is that okay? Am I one chapter ahead?
Yeah, this is the first one where they're just being very polite, and Faramir is like, "All right, hey, we're gonna go set this ambush thing. I'm gonna set these two dudes to watch you. If I come back alive, we're gonna talk more." And then he's like, the halflings are courteous folk, whatever else they may be.
That's right. You're right.
It's all
farewell.
It's all very polite and sort of.
Yeah, but it's also cagey because he's they both kind of know something is up with the other one.
Oh, Faramir is definitely holding stuff back, and obviously Frodo is holding stuff back for sure.
So at this point in time, I don't think you'd know that Faramir is Boromir's brother, but Frodo and Sam have admitted that Boromir was a companion of theirs.
And Aragorn. They also name drop Aragorn.
Although it's only later when they explain who Aragorn is. So Aragorn's still an unknown quantity.
Yep. Faramir didn't know Aragorn, right?
Yeah,
no. Which I think maybe is even funnier is they're we're with Aragorn, and they go, who the fuck is Aragorn? I have no idea who this person is.
Oddly enough, they didn't mention Gandalf.
So
right? 7 companions we had, 1 we lost at Moria. But if there's someone in a party to name drop, it's just be like, yo, dudes, I was hanging out with Gandalf.
I kind of took that as it's too painful still. Like they don't want to talk about Gandalf, The point that they didn't name drop Aragorn, they kind of do though, right? So, are the riddling words known to you that Boromir brought to Rivendell? Seek for the sword that was broken, right? And then the words are known indeed. And then Aragorn, whom I named, is the bearer of the sword that was broken. And so, like the people of Gondor, like they know about the sword that is broken. What is maybe interesting is that they may not know it by exactly that formation, maybe, because like to us as the reader, we know exactly what that's pointing to. It raises an interesting idea about like what people know. So like we get into the idea that Faramir doesn't know what Isildur's Bane is. And we get into Faramir doesn't know what the sword that was broken is either, right? So there's some interesting things to pull there in terms of like what characters know and what they don't know versus what the audience, the reader, knows.
But Faramir knows more about Isildur's Bane than basically everybody else in Minas Tirith, which gets established, I think, in the next chapter. Because he was remembering Gandalf came 17 years ago when I was like 10, and I hung out with that guy.
So here's a question.
He's looking at.
Here's a question, and this is maybe Gadfly or Ozzy or some of you guys that are smarter on this stuff than me. How old is Faramir?
Sorry, go ahead.
How old is Faramir? Right, because one of the things that I didn't catch on my previous kind of reads was that the Rangers of Gondor are Dunedain, like the Rangers of the North that Aragorn is part of, and that apparently the stewards of Gondor are also fairly purely Númenorian blood as well. So that Gondor still has some people who have held themselves a little bit apart that are still the blood of Númenor. So is Faramir, is Denethor also 150 years old, right? Is the long lives of the Dunedain, is that something that extends to the line of stewards?
I'm looking on some wiki and it says that Faramir lived to be 120.
Yeah, I don't think they had. Maybe they had a little bit, if that's true, Dane. But
120 would. Yeah, 120 would be pretty standard. I mean, this has come up in conversations we had before, but 120 is established in the book of Hebrews as sort of that's the sort of the high water mark of the lives of men post the fall, right? So
Faramir was about late.
Would known that
Faramir should have been about late 30s in this story.
Okay. So then, so Gandalf showed up a few times when he was still on his mother's apron strings.
Faramir was 38 at this point, so Faramir was 11 when this happened, or when Gandalf showed up. Or no, I'm sorry.
No, if it was 17 years prior,
it was 21.
Yeah. So he would have been frat boy age.
Yeah.
So good for him for putting down the Bud Light. Although, or is it Coors Light or Miller Light?
Yeah, he's based. He drinks Coors Light.
Gondor Wiser.
Gondor Wiser.
But Faramir was always a dork. Boromir was the stud athlete, and
Yeah.
Faramir was the quiet poetry guy.
Yeah. The shy little brother who was forced into having to be a stud when he didn't want to.
Right.
Hey,
And
Trip
ended up
points
really
out
being
that
one.
Faramir, 36, and that Eowyn is 24. So hey,
Yep.
good for Faramir.
Good job.
Giddy up.
Nice.
Save a horse, ride a cowboy.
So
Fucking Rohan.
so we get to the ambush on the Haradrim and the Southrons, right? Or and the Oliphant, right? The Mablung, right? No, Mablung is the name of a guy. Sorry, I'm
Mhm.
Mumak?
whatever the other word for Oliphant was.
Mumax.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this was the point there that I wanted to kind of bring up. Tolkien's kind of World War I experience. The fact that World War I, one of the things that characterized it was that like a major battle could be happening like one trench over, and like you would never be a part of it. It was pretty common for like very isolated, attempts to kind of break through lines. And the way that he's describing, specifically hearing the sounds of battle and things like that, in my mind was probably very much his kind of lived experience, right? The like sitting there and listening to the battle. And I think he talks about it. It sounds like hundreds blacksmiths hammering together or something like that, something kind of similar to that.
Suddenly the horns rang out louder, and beyond the mistake from above, over the top of the slope, Sam thought that he heard the cries and wild shouting also, but the sound was faint, as if it came out of a distant cave. Then presently the noise of fighting broke out near at hand, just above their hiding place. He could hear plainly the ringing grate of steel on steel, the clang of sword on iron cap, the dull beat of blade on shield. Men were yelling and screaming, and one clear, loud voice was calling, "Gondor, Gondor." "It sounds like 100 blacksmiths all smithying together," said Sam to Frodo. "They're as near as I want them now."
And exactly that chapter or that section there. The idea that the sound is coming over the hill, which I think over the top of the trench, right? I don't know. I was really kind of impressed, I guess, with the way of describing this. I don't know. It's one of the more interesting kind of battle scenes that I've read. So I thought it was very noteworthy.
Yeah. Well, and how common would that perspective really have been to those people who are in any type of warfare? Is, boy, this is about as close to it as I want to get. I mean, that really, really describes the fear that can grip anybody in the middle of it. I mean, it's not all just this sword and board heroism that gets romantically put out there. It is really a terrifying thing to come into play with.
And
Especially if you're a hobbit.
Frodo and Sam are not warriors, so this is not the world they want anything to do with,
Yeah.
Yep.
So that's actually an interesting point, because the experience that we get of Frodo and Sam watching, and they're as near as I want now, or as I want them. And then we have the two, so Mablung and what was the name of the other?
Damrod?
Damrod, thank you. So the two of them and their experience seemed interesting to me, because I could see how you're really having two separate experiences of the same event. Whereas Mablung and Damrod were probably like, they didn't want to be here guarding hobbits, right? Like they're hearing this and wanting to like run to the sound of the battle and save their friends and participate in the mission that they kind of set out on, right? And here they are stuck on the sidelines watching some of their friends die in order to guard these two hobbits. And so I think that it's interesting that we don't really see their perspective. But in my mind, reading this, that was the dichotomy that I'm seeing. And Ozzy, I think you're right about Frodo and Sam not being soldiers, whereas the two of these, who we learned are Dunedain, they are sort of the blood of old Numenor. They speak Numenorian, right? Whatever the language is actually called. Sorry, lore experts. So there's an interesting thing that happens in this scene: the audience's perspective, Frodo and Sam's perspective, and then the perspective of the two rangers.
Yep. But I do think it's interesting that Frodo even says, Faramir, buddy, we'd love to go with you, or we would go with you if we would be useful, but we're fucking hobbits, so there's like no point. So give Sam and Frodo a little bit of credit. They would have rocked up had they been useful.
Yeah, well, and Sam also, when that one guy falls mere feet from them, he does have that line in there where he was glad that he could not see his face. And then you have that line that is actually given to Faramir in the movies, where he wonders, was he really evil? What did he really have horrible things? Would we not have been friends or something like that?
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, so we're up to the window on the west, which is good. We got a little bit of time left for some of our members here, our panel. So we'll try and get through this. Chapter 5, the window on the west, and this is where I think, Alex, you were talking about. So Faramir comes back, and they have kind of a hasty little conclave where him and Sam or Frodo start talking, and Sam is watching this all unfold and is like, "Now wait now." So what did you want to kind of say about that conversation?
Just my favorite part of it is the other Dunedain snickering, like in the background as Sam lectures him.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
There's like, wow, that midget has very strong opinions on this topic.
Yep.
But I also do think it shows, hey, Sam is to this at every moment standing up for Frodo. But I also think Faramir drops the line, like, you wish that I would be hasty. However, I will never be hasty when it comes to, a decision like this that might involve your death. And that kind of backs Sam off a little bit, where it's, oh, that's the consequences of this conversation that we're talking about. Maybe do take your time on this. Maybe don't sentence us to death.
No rush. Take your time.
Yeah, do what you got to do, man.
We don't want to be too hasty.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So for me, this is one of the bigger departures that the film takes. So here we've got Faramir, and he gets a little chance to interrogate Frodo and Sam, at least initially. Then they go off and fight the Haradrim. Now they're back, and as you say, he's basically putting them on trial kind of in front of all his men. They bring up Isildur's Bane, but then they steer the conversation towards Boromir. And then afterwards, Faramir says, look, I knew that Isildur's Bane was not going to be a subject that we should be discussing in front of everyone. That's why I steered the conversation about my brother. Now you're going to tell me what you know. And you get a heck of a lot more, I think, lore dropping
Yes.
In this than you do in the film.
Yeah.
And I don't know. One thing that I think is missing is the ring working on Faramir. And I don't even know if it does. But I think that the movies did a really good job of comparing and contrasting Boromir with Faramir. One that was tempted by the ring and one that was able to resist it. And then, obviously, the payoff for all of that is in the how Denethor interprets that later on. But I think we're getting into spoiler territory.
Yeah.
for next week.
I think there was the movies did a good contrast between the two. I would have preferred that they present Faramir as Tolkien did, which basically was, here is like the one human being, maybe aside from Aragorn, who was in terms of in relation to the ring, impenetrable, because his interest was more for the men around him, the goodness of the country itself, and more stalwart against the enemy. He was just the absolute epitome of everything that was good in Gondor, that Boromir, while Boromir was great and heroic, had that weakness, had that chink in his armor that he couldn't overcome, but redeemed himself for. Faramir was the brother that didn't need that redemptive story.
I think I have,
but there's also it's a question of character, because Faramir was always reluctant to accept the mantle and wasn't necessarily the icon to the entirety of, the Gondorian military that Boromir was. So it's, in a way, Faramir does have his own weaknesses. His weaknesses just happen to not correspond with, ambition and greed, such that the ring might be able to capitalize on it. So
yeah, I think what you guys are saying here ties into Tripp's comment here about Boromir being the warrior, Faramir being less interested in kind of that and power. And there's this one section that I wanted to read, and I think is going right to what Nathan was talking about, where Faramir is describing his motives, right, and kind of who he is as a person. And he's got this line saying, "For myself, I would see the white tree in flower in the court of the kings, and the silver crown return, and Minas Tirith in peace, Minas Anor again as of old, full of light, high and fair, beautiful as a queen among other queens, not a mistress of many slaves, nay, not even a mistress or a kind mistress of willing slaves. War must be, while we defend our lives against a destroyer who would devour all. But I do not love the bright sword for its sharpness, nor the arrow for its swiftness, nor the warrior for his glory. I love only that which they defend. The city of the men of Numenor, and I would have loved her for her memory, her ancientry, her beauty, and her present wisdom, not feared, save as men may fear the dignity of a man old and wise."
That is some beautiful romantic language.
Like Faramir, can we just say it? Faramir is a freaking boss. Like everything he says there is just like, man.
Yep. But what is utterly amazing about that is that may be the second best Faramir dialogue in this chapter. Like, in any other series, that is maybe the best, that is very likely the best bit of dialogue in the series.
All right, you're gonna have to give us the best dialogue next. You know that, right?
Oh, it's the "You must truly be from a wonderful place where gardeners are held in such high esteem."
That is a pretty good one. That's a good line. That's a good line.
Oh, I fuck it. I mean, it's very much sort of a continuation of the same.
Yeah. I think I agree with you. Okay. I'm not sure I put that one above this one, but
I think you're right. I think Gardner in high esteem is probably number 2. But the fact that there's a conversation to be had, I feel like, really does demonstrate where the dialogue is in this series, and why, I'm just going to say it, I don't think anything has gotten close to touching it since.
No. All of it, the stuff where, so this is them walking on the way to the sort of hidden place, right? Whereas the other stuff was them, right after the battle, kind of having their little council where he's deciding, do I have to kill you guys like my orders say to, or am I going to take you and like continue this conversation, make my decision later? And in both places, the dialogue is just fantastic. So
yeah. So with that, I got to jump, but I really appreciate you guys having me on the stream again. I'm looking forward to the next 5 chapters because, damn, they're epic. Ozzy, it was good to meet you, brother. Really enjoyed your takes on this section and your personal history with Tolkien. So,
well, I think we're I think we're closing up here anyway. But as if I might say before you depart,
Sure.
but I can say this: you have an heir too, sir. That reminds me of Gandalf of Wizards. I was thinking of you and your pipe and beard, and you guys think I'm amiss here? I think Amanda Manethrin.
All we need is to get him a proper Gandalf hat, and he's there.
Oh,
Yeah. Well, and a staff that will hold my pipe.
oh, true. That's true.
That would be awesome.
One of those really long ones. They get, with a long stem.
Yes.
I actually have one.
There you go.
Okay. Next time.
Yep. Next time.
Pipe,
I'll try to
pipe
remember
cleaners
that.
don't quite reach all the way down. So
They do not. You have to tie them in a knot and slide it through, and it doesn't work sometimes.
Well,
all right, fellas.
As always, thanks for being on. What are you doing on your channel upcoming?
Well, I've got some things going on in personal life that are putting things on hold. So, it will be some time, but Lord willing, I'll get back to it and get the ball rolling. But in the meantime, streams like this and the one on Nerdporial with the Wheel of Time, the Dragon Reborn, have been a good mainstay, and it's just good to talk about books and good stories.
So at a minimum, I guess we'll see you next Sunday, probably on the Nerdporial Lifeforms channel. Then for more the Dragon Reborn.
Absolutely, awesome. We will.
Yep. And Pips, unfortunately, I also have to dip here.
Yes.
So appreciate it. As always, great conversation. Absolutely love it. And Trip is absolutely killing it in the chat. So definitely highlight some of her comments.
Yep.
See you, Alex.
Later, boys.
Yep. Take care, guys.
Both of you guys. Thanks for being on. And then there were 3.
About time. Jeez.
Well, now we can really dig into OzzyModo's here. His thoughts on we've reached the end of this section, right? So now we can talk kind of more thematically, I guess.
Sure. Feel bad I couldn't be better prepared. No copies of the books here, but
yeah, we normally do ask people to show their kind of their book porn, if you will. And you told me
next time. So
your books are back in Seattle.
I do have a full set of Wheel of Time here, right there.
Nice.
Is that the book club edition or edition?
Book club editions. Yeah, those are the smaller, slightly smaller.
Nice
books, but I don't have a lot of books here. So these are all. Let's see if I can point right. These are all music and or Beatles books. So I brought all my Beatles. Got a couple of John Lennon biographies and other books about all the Beatles songs and everything. So that's what those books are. And some heavy metal books. So,
there is one thing. This is a segue. Not really even a segue.
I want to say one thing about Faramir. He's definitely one of the best characters. I really like him. He's not a dickhead like Boromir comes across as. So. His dad's certainly a dickhead, so they're great foils in the story, and Faramir's just this idealized Englishman, basically, right? That's what he is. I really like the character. Tolkien's a genius. So
now here's one thing that I'll say. I actually like the film take on Faramir, and part of it is, even though he's in the story for a briefer period of time, it gives him an arc, and it's an arc that can compare and contrast with that of his brother.
Yeah.
Because here it seems that he is the upstanding kind of archetype or an iconic character, so to speak, from the start, and he is not tempted by the ring. He does the right thing immediately. They don't have the little side trek into Osgiliath that they do in the film. And some of the lines like, "The Shire must be a great place where gardeners are held in such high esteem." That comes at the end of the Frodo Sam Faramir arc in the film. And it comes kind of right even before the Forbidden Pool right now. So I don't know. I kind of like that the ring gets to go to work on Faramir, that he's tempted by it. He's also sorely tempted by what he knows his father's reaction is going to be, and that he's able to come through it. That kind of gives him an arc in the film that he doesn't necessarily have.
But in the
story.
book, the ring doesn't have anything it can grab onto, right? Because in theory, he's quote unquote pure, or has pure motives, and from a
Yeah, and I guess
so the ring can't really find anything to work on. Same thing why it couldn't work on Frodo. It took so dang long because there's nothing for it to work on, and why it didn't work on Sam, because Sam was around the ring a ton, but it didn't really work on him at all, right? So he's the ultimate shields up guy. And Faramir had some of that, and Frodo, who eventually succumbs, had a little bit of flaws, and it was Sam and Faramir that, and you would imagine if Faramir was around it longer, it maybe might have worked on him, but that's the sort of tell with Sam that it just didn't work on.
I think that's actually the reason that I've always liked Faramir, and the reason that I think that it's important that Faramir was unaffected by the ring, because the split between Faramir and Boromir and their motives, personalities, the things that they care about, points to why the ring doesn't affect the hobbits generally, right? Like the hobbits are as a people, and I think Gadfly brought this up in the chat before, that like the hobbits embody as a people sort of the the virtues as Tolkien saw them, right? And Frodo and Sam maybe especially so among hobbits. But I think by having Faramir, and he lays out what his motives are, like his motives are truly selfless. And he has that line where he says, like, not if I found it on the side of the road would I pick it up, right? And I think that highlights for the reader, who's got to be asking at this point, like, Frodo is starting to feel the weight. He's starting to struggle. And you have to be asking yourself, is Frodo going to succumb? And this is maybe like a flash of insight or kind of a bright point for the reader, saying like, no, like Frodo is like Faramir. He is not to be ultimately, pulled by the ring. At least he has the defenses against it. And we see the limits of that, right? We do. But I think that it's an important part to highlight with the character of Faramir.
Yeah, but also Frodo saves himself, as Bilbo is sort of showing when he doesn't kill Sméagol either, but Frodo saves himself by letting Sméagol, letting him live. And
I like the foreshadowing for that. Did you guys catch the foreshadowing for Sam, or for Frodo and Gollum in I guess it would have been the Dead Marshes chapter?
Don't have the book, so I can't look.
Okay, here we can continue.
Go deep for me, Pips. I'm ready. I got my waders on, so you can take me to the deep end.
So I think that it's in the Passage of the Marshes where he's swearing, right? And he's saying that like his highest priority, right, would be to not let the ring go to him, right? I'm looking for the line.
So the swearing on the ring is at the end of the Taming of Sméagol, if that's where it is.
Yeah. And this is, I'm fully admitting here, this could be some motivated reading where like I kind of know the end, but I feel like that's the kind of thing that an author does lay, right? Like it is the intentional foreshadowing there, but the idea that I think he swears first to basically make sure that it never goes to Sauron, right?
I'll buy it.
Well, I'll look into it later. You guys can tell me if you think I'm off here and I'm reading way too much into it. But
so I want to kind of get back really quickly, I guess, to Faramir. Do we think then that the films fundamentally changed his character? Because he is like the kid brother with a chip on his shoulder trying to impress daddy in the film.
Yeah, I think they did change him a little bit. Yeah.
So
go ahead, Pips.
Sorry.
I was going to say in the books, I don't think he really cared what his father thought, right? So he was just doing his duty. He was, he might have cared a little bit, but he wasn't modifying his behavior based on that as a motivation.
And I will say that one of the scenes that I really didn't like from Return of the King, at least the movie, is the one where Faramir goes and rides out while his father eats the cherry tomatoes or whatnot.
It's a great scene, but it's
a great scene because Billy Boyd can sing, man. It's a
Was
great
he really
song.
singing that?
Yeah, Billy Boyd.
Yeah, he actually, yeah,
very cool.
Home is behind. Like anyway, really, really good song and everything, but it felt way too melodramatic. And I think it's also at the point of the story where Faramir has shown his quality and he should be sticking up for the decisions. And it's just like, yeah, I didn't let the ring come to the city, Dad. It would have done a number on you. It would have killed you or corrupted you like it took out Boromir.
He's already corrupted, right? So the ring would have laughed and said, well, I own this guy now. So yeah.
Anyways, we're getting far into territory, but interesting thing to highlight. Faramir is a much different character.
You actually kind of led exactly on the point that I wanted to say in response to whether or not they changed him. If I can find the exact line here, it's when Sam opens his full mouth and says what there is. So here it is. Okay, so the line about now's a chance for Faramir, Captain of Gondor, to show his character or show his quality, right? In the movie is Denethor sort of mockingly to Faramir when Faramir says that he wants to do the quest to Rivendell, right? And then again, I think later. Yeah. And I think again later maybe in the conversation about him riding out, and then Faramir says it again when he's tempted by the ring, right? So it's a throwback to his father's kind of disdain for him and the chip on his shoulder, like you said, as the younger brother, which I don't think is established here in the books. I think that's the movie's interpretation. Whereas here we have Sam saying, now look here, sir, don't you go taking advantage of my master because his servants know better than a fool. You've spoken very handsome all along, put me off my guard, talking of elves and all, but handsome is as handsome does, we say. Now's a chance to show your quality. And then he says a pretty stroke of fortune, a chance for Faramir, Captain of Gondor, to show his quality. And then he goes straight from there, basically saying that Boromir failed the trial, that trial was exactly the thing that Boromir would have failed. That, I knew my brother, I loved him, I would have, looked for the chance to avenge him, but I also knew him, right? And then he says, but I am not such a man. And it's got the line here, I think, where he then goes on and says, if I found it on the side of the road, I would not take it up, right? Like, so I think that one line is in two different places in the book and then serves a different function in the movie to recast his character a little bit.
Yeah.
And again, it's to give him an arc in the movie, whereas he's kind of set up like this from the introduction in the books. So...
Ooh. We said the same thing about Aragorn, didn't we? That like the movies made an arc for Aragorn, where in the book Aragorn is he's just Aragorn. He already he's already max level, He's been grinding for his life. He shows up and he's like, yeah, let's do this.
Level 75 Ranger.
There you go.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, I think we got
Trip
through
is
this
saying that
whole
she doesn't
section.
think that they changed him that much, and I agree. I think it's a subtle change. Would you guys agree with that? I think it's a subtle change.
Yeah, I thought it was good. It was good movie making. It was.
Yes,
they portrayed Denethor as this crazy out of touch, megalomaniac.
I understand the change. I agree with it, but it's one of those things where it's kind of expected now that for all type of media that people, well, aside from the new Star Wars, audiences want a character that has an arc, right? They want a character that shows some growth, and they don't actually really like iconic characters, except in certain instances. right? Iconic characters can be great, right? The Sherlock Holmes and the James Bond types, but fuck, even the James Bond movies, they're trying to give him an arc more and more. But now we're veering off into side territory.
Yeah, well, in the books, James Bond gets the crap kicked out of him all the time. That's why the first Daniel Craig James Bond book was actually, James Bond movie was Casino Royale. It was truer to the books than a lot of them, because in the books he does get the shit kicked out of him all the time. He's the typical hero of kick the shit out of your hero for a while and then let him win in the end, right? That's, you're right, Dave. You know that how that works. Shout out to LPK, by the way. He says he's trying to behave himself. So,
God,
Kinslayer.
That's all right, LPK. We're not monetized and probably never will be. So you're safe in our chat section.
Until we start showing some of his memes and then attributing them. But
true.
The genius that is LPK.
If you can find those on the old White Cloak subreddit, I mean, just look for LPK and then look at some of his posts. There's some genius.
I've seen them. I was the king of lurkers on there. So yeah.
Well, we like you now that you're not lurking. Thanks for being on here with us. This is a good conversation. I think for as much as I kind of did the intro for this, that like there's not as much that happens. Like the characters are really the highlight of this section, right? There's no big set pieces. It's all about the characters. It's all about the relationships between the characters. And I really like the fact that this is highlighting Tolkien's ability as an author, right? In that he went from battles with the orcs at Rauros and at Helm's Deep and sort of at Isengard, and then now he's here in like a much more subdued kind of setting, and is still, off the top rope with some of these Faramir lines, right?
Yeah, he's man. I love Robert Jordan to death, but sometimes I wish he would have had the editorial fortitude that Tolkien did, because Tolkien could have gone, but he wrote all the backstory first, right? So he had this, he created this world in his head, and wrote this great, when you go from The Hobbit to The Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit's basically kind of geared as a children's book, right? And then Lord of the Rings is just this masterpiece, but it all works because of how much backstory the guy created, and it just lived in it. So one of the things I liked about Star Wars when it originally came out is all these throwaway lines about, you fought in the Clone Wars with my father. So, George Lucas laid all this backstory. It wasn't as deep as Tolkien because it was,
but it didn't have to be. That's the key about backstory is if you do it right, people will see the iceberg and assume that there's a hell of a lot underneath the water.
Your own.
It's just the ice. It's just the tip of the iceberg. That's all that's actually been done. There's nothing under the water.
Which brings us back to Robert Jordan and the genius of Eye of the World, in that it does a lot of work with that as well, versus the Wheel of Prime show, which tries to explain everything and just highlights how shallow it is, how the pieces don't fit together, how trash their story is. Whereas Robert Jordan left some mysteries for him to later come and revisit, and crafted a fantastic story that has all of us, decades later, still talking about it and still forming friendships and connections with people across the country, across the world, about how great this series is. And to be able to be with some of you guys in the chat, you guys joining the panel and talking about, Tolkien's work and doing sort of the same kind of bridge building is a lot of fun. I've really enjoyed this book club.
Yeah, it's kind of fun. I'm glad you invited me, Dane. Thanks for reaching out. It was a good window because my wife and daughter went shopping this morning. So when I darkened my screen, they came in to show me some of the stuff that they had.
Were you getting the credit card alerts?
Yeah. So our daughter flew down from Seattle for the weekend. So but it's a fun weekend. Cinco de Mayo party last night. Today we're going to Arizona State baseball game. So my buddy's son's one of their pitchers. So go hang out with them and drink some beers at the baseball game. Actually, we're having a taco bar we're going to continue Cinco de Mayo into the weekend. So
what kind of beers are you going to be drinking or not drinking?
Well, Dos Equis probably. Some Dos Equis. Yeah, I can't. I usually drink Michelob Ultra, right? Being a fat boy, I try and drink the low carb stuff because I'm all about volume over quality. You highbrow guys in your IPAs, but Coors Light works. So, but yeah, definitely. I've actually never been a Bud Light drinker, so I don't have to change my ways because of that. So, not into rice in my beer. I'll take some wheat in my beer, but not rice. So,
yeah, if you're gonna drink some rice beer, at least go get some Sapporo or some Odeon or
Sapporo's pretty good. Actually, I'm not a beer snob at all. I'll drink whatever, but I don't like the super hoppy stuff. But
I mean, the best beer is free, and the second best is cold, right? Didn't know.
Go do yourself a favor. I know it's technically an Anheuser-Busch InBev product, and I don't know how far the whole boycott's extending, but Leffe Blonde, that's my beer of choice. It's a Abbey Ale, but it's fortified. It's good.
If you're gonna drink Abbey Ale, go get some Chimay.
Chimay. I've had Chimay in Belgium. It's freaking good. That's a good call. Chimay is good.
Chimay, but there's the blonde Leffe. It's like a bridge. If you don't want to go
Chimay,
full on.
Is that a blonde stripper, Dan? Chimay? Is that what you
said? That's the lady down the street that Dane throws quarters at. Isn't that a Canadian thing? You throw coins at them or something?
Well, technically, we have a $2 coin, so it's not that we're cheap.
Jacob, I don't know about that.
But it is Canadian, so it's like 60 cents on the dollar.
There you go. No, that's why you don't get the runs, Jacob, because the alcohol kills the bacteria. So
that's true.
All right, we're veering.
Okay.
Don't drink mixed drinks because it has ice in it. You drink beer.
You drink your alcohol neat, so you don't get the water and the ice, and then you drink beer and wine. These hey, this is the wisdom of the ancients right there.
I still got hair, but yeah, it's gray. That's the old being the oldest white cloak has its advantages. Yeah.
All right. Well, hey, I think we've probably gone on long enough. We've covered the book. Ozzy, we'll have to have you on again because we want to see the book collection. And
I'll be up there until roughly January again, and then I'll be down here again. So
awesome.
Happy to show it. Yep.
Let's see. On White Cloaks this week, I think Jacob Ironside in the chat. I've invited him on, and I'm saying it publicly, so we have to do it. This upcoming week, we're going to have a conversation with him about Wheel of Time. He started reading because of some of the things that a few of us have been saying, prompting him into getting into the story. And I think he's up to also potentially the Dragon Reborn. You'd have to tell us, Jacob, where exactly you're at. But always looking forward to talking to a first-time reader. Plus, Jacob is a great dude, so looking forward to having him on the channel. Awesome. And then I think tomorrow, Alex and I are going to be on with one of the Discord members, his channel. Let's see if I can get a link dropped in the
love you.
Dropped in the chat here. I should be able to. Give me a second. Littering and
smoking the reefer.
Think.
I dropped his stuff in the Discord, telling people that they could go ahead and post there. And now I'm looking for the actual stream.
I'm pimping for the baseball. Oh, that's backwards.
Oh, here we go. I found the link, guys. It's shoot, copy. There we go.
Ozzy, I didn't want to say nothing, but I realized that you were backwards when I saw your Wheel of Time books, and they were in the wrong color order.
I'm backwards. That's funny right there. I don't care who you are.
All right, I figured it out. I've managed
Dan and I stalled long enough to
become technically proficient enough to drop a link there. So his channel name is Technically Mexican, and that is a link to his Wheel of Time video about the Jordan Con video release. It's super great. You guys should check him out. Give us a sub to him. We'll be on there tomorrow, I think like 6 p.m. Mountain Time or something weird. I don't know who uses Mountain Time. That just seems wrong.
Trip does. Dan does.
I know Dan and Trip do that.
He's just being a dick. And with that,
seems like the perfect time to end it. All right, guys.
See you guys. Behave. All right.
Bye.
Happy Stace de Mayo.
Yes.